3, 2, 1.
Hello, my name is Matthew Kogner. I am Mario's case manager and school psychologist when I'm wearing my hat. I would like each of you to introduce yourself and tell us your role in the meeting.
I'm Nana Frazier. I am Mario's gen ed teacher, and I have him for language arts and a reading remediation class.
I'm Mackenzie, and I'm Mario's mom.
Brady, I'm Mario's father.
Okay. Here's a copy of your procedural safeguards. These safeguards are designed to protect you guys and Mario. Do you have any questions in relation to your rights?
Nope.
No.
Okay. So the purpose of this meeting today is to review the IEP for Mario. This will serve as Mario's annual IEP. And in order to have an effective, productive meeting today, we have scheduled 1 hour to complete this meeting. The time is now 3:15 p.m. Ms. Frazier will be our timekeeper for this meeting, and if the meeting has not been completed in the time frame, we will reconvene as soon as possible. So remember that this IEP is just a draft and can be changed during this meeting. Okay? So I'm going to turn the floor to Ms. Frazier, our general ed teacher.
So I want to talk a little bit about Mario's strengths and his interests. So he's really good with his hands. He likes to put together puzzles, and he also talks a lot about doing mechanical kind of work, and that he gets different parts and simple machines from the scrapyard, and he works with those. And he's athletic and strong, and he does really well in PE class because of that. And so he just has kind of a general interest in cars, and he can give lots of information about automobiles, so he can recite all sorts of things. And so those are just the strengths and interests that we've seen here at school. So academically, his strengths, he's struggling a bit in class, so he's having issues understanding basic sentence structure. He answered 3 out of 16 district unit assessment questions correctly regarding subjects and predicates. Okay, so, and again, that has to do with sentence structure. I've talked to him outside of class about reading because that's also a concern, and he says, he reported to me that he thinks that school's pointless. And I asked if he was excited about reading The Hunger Games because he seemed interested in The Hunger Games when we initially started working on it this week. He was talking to some of his friends and seemed pretty excited about it, but he seems to be having a hard time with actually reading the material. And then he later answered only 3 of 10 questions correctly on a quiz for reading comprehension for The Hunger Games. So he gets frustrated with in-class activities as well, which I think directly ties to the reading concerns we have.
So as Mario's school psychologist, I see his strengths, according to my testing and observation. It is apparent that he has a very high body and kinesthetic and spatial intelligences. It's obviously, it makes sense because of what we're seeing in other parts of the classroom. He also shows a logical mathematical intelligence within the normal range for a student his age. And I've also heard from his math teacher that he's really, he does really well in geometry and some of those spatial reasoning concepts. Okay, so for present level, according to the current Wyatt test that we decided to give just to see kind of where he was still at, he still shows that he has a severe discrepancy in both oral language and total reading, which was expected. He is also identified as having an emotional disability that hinders him from effectively recognizing, interpreting, or controlling fundamental emotions. Okay? So as his case manager, I see his strengths and interests are Mario has a very healthy supply of energy. He works really hard during one-on-one instruction. And he displays a strength in geometry, which we talked about earlier, and is passing all of his classes with the exception of language arts. So he's pretty good at school with the exception of where we see that he has a learning disability. Academics, Mario is placed in for present levels, Mario is placed in reading intervention that is geared towards fluency and reading comprehension. And according to progress monitoring, given 4th grade short story reading, Comprehension questions, he's answering with 80% accuracy on with 3 consecutive opportunities. So and then also given 4th grade reading passages, his fluency is at about 132 words per minute, which is pretty good considering his previous goal was 125 words per minute, and he's increased his comprehension reading level from the 3rd grade to the 4th grade in the last 3 months. So it's a pretty big jump. So Mario continues throughout all our observation, he continues to exhibit a need for special instruction in reading and written language. Considering that he's in 7th grade, you can see, even though he's improving, we're still at the 4th grade level for comprehension. Okay?
All right, well, Mario can be a nice boy. I mean, he's pretty smart in some way.
Mechanically, yeah.
And he does, I mean, he talks about PE and he likes math and he likes to help out his dad.
Likes football. He likes hanging out with his animals. We
So
got a
he's
dog and a
bringing
cat. And,
stray dogs home,
yeah.
fixing them up.
How do you guys feel about, I mean, what's your present level what do you think his present level performance is at home? Like what's he doing?
I mean, he's pretty quiet. He keeps himself. He's in his room a lot.
When he's not in his room, he's running around with his friends out when he's supposed to be in the room.
And we address that. I mean, we take care of
That's
that.
the only way to learn. Give him the belt.
She usually fixes it for a little bit.
She doesn't like to do it, but I don't mind it.
But he really likes reading. I mean, the car magazines. I mean, he's reading. So I feel like
Yeah.
we see him
He
reading
works
the
out in the
magazines.
shop and he's fast, you know. Faster than most of the boys his age, I think.
But I know he's just sick of being nagged at school. He's failing and he just doesn't want to go. He doesn't feel good about it.
Yeah, and I didn't either. When I went to school, and I don't know, I always thought, you know, well, you need to read if you can turn a wrench. So my father told me, and I try not to tell him that, but I think he picks up on it.
Well, he thinks his teachers hate him, and that's why he's not doing good.
Yeah.
You know, I could speak for some of his teachers, and I've had observations and conversations with him. And I could say that his teachers don't hate him. At times he is very difficult, especially when it comes to his behavior. But I know most of his teachers speak pretty highly of him.
He just feels like he's picked on.
Yeah.
You're always picking him out.
You know, and that might be part of his disability a little bit because he has that inability to be able, you know, to pick up on, connections with other people. That's part of his disability, is like him just being able to connect and him just being able to respond to others and to develop those relationships. That part of his disability is that he's experiencing a disconnect. And so, you know, that's something that we'll be working on within this annual IEP.
And that ties right into, like, with his reading, that, you know, he gets some extra attention because of that. And I think he perceives that maybe as being picked on, rather than he's getting some extra assistance.
I think
So it can be that perception piece.
I think it's just embarrassing him. It's making him feel dumb.
Okay, and we'll address that. I think with, you know, we are going to, later on we'll talk about accommodations, and one of his accommodations is that he gets to work with the school social worker to work on some of those replacement behaviors, to work on, you know, developing real relationships with his peers and teachers. And that way, if he can find a connection somewhere in the building, rather than feeling disconnected, which is, he says these things because he's trying to explain that disconnect, probably. And so if we can teach him how to build a connection, you know, I think you're probably going to see a lot better attitude in response to school.
What's a replacement?
So replacement behavior is what kind of like, so if you think about a behavior as something you do, so the replacement behavior is the wanted reaction or what you want them to do. So like for instance, if you want them to, if they're walking around the halls and they're tripping other kids, you know, the replacement behavior would be to how would you properly walk down the halls, you know, keeping your hands and feet and body objects to yourself, you know, and just those things, and then talking about those basic things and showing himself and showing himself that he can see the triggers that he's going through that correlate to that behavior. So like he you know, sometimes kids like Mario, he loses track, you know, he comes out of PE, he's all excited, he's all, you know, energetic.
With his friends.
And he's with his friends and he doesn't even recognize his own behavior. And so some of that, part of that behavior replacement is for him to identify his own behavior, to try to like nip it in the bud before it gets too bad, and then replace it with behavior that is appropriate, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
So Nana, would you like to talk about his behavioral present levels?
So we do have some concerns still about his behavior. So he's unproductively outspoken and noisy, so we can have students who do share a lot more in class, but it's because they're contributing to what's going on in class, but his is more kind of off-topic conversation and just kind of more extra noises, and 3 out of 4 times that independent work is assigned. So that too can be one of those avoidance things. If something's hard for him, we tend to see those type of behaviors. He also began loudly telling a joke during an observation to his peers at his work area, and he was unresponsive at first for attempts to kind of encourage him, redirect him to be quiet and to continue working and to get him back on task. So he's been moved to different work areas around the classroom to kind of see if maybe it was certain students that kind of were triggering him or he was wanting to engage with. But so far it hasn't improved his behavior, so it doesn't seem to be a specific student he's around that's encouraging that behavior. Sometimes we see that as well. So an example of his unpredictable behavior is when Mario was red carded during language arts on October 21st. So he was working on a worksheet silently in class. Then he threw down his pencil and loudly said, "This sucks." He laughed loudly, and after speaking with him about that behavior, he was more focused, but he continued to whisper to his neighbor, so we still saw some off-task
Sounds like
kind of
something you
behavior.
get at home too.
Yeah. And then I told him to get back to work and respond to say, "Get off my ass," and at this point, he was red carded. So
What's the red card?
redirecting. So that's when a student is sent out of
You
the
get
classroom
kicked
then to, and they go to the SSC that we have here, so it's a student support center. And so they kind of, they do the same type of processing, but in a different way than working specifically with a social worker. So they kind of go through what the event was and what could have been done differently and kind of process what happened.
It makes, yes, they have to reflect on what happens and then they have to document it. So
And
that
that's
We-
a one-on-one.
Well, we got a sheet from that.
Yeah.
Just get off my ass.
Yeah. So the consequence for Mario receiving a red card is he has 2 hours of after-school detention. So there's typically some type of consequence depending on if it's a pattern of behavior and if there's been multiple red cards.
And he knows these consequences. He knows we have it pretty set in the ACE room as his special ed case manager instructor. We talk about what type of behavior is going to happen, what's going to become, whether it's a positive behavior or a negative behavior, what's the consequence of this happening. And we've talked, because you know his behavior in classroom is been a recurring theme. We talk. He knows the consequence of pushing that button, and then finally where he's been warned once, he's been warned twice, and then he deliberately refuses, and then insults or responds in such a way where cursing or anything like that. He knows the consequence of responding, and he knew that he was going to get red carded in this situation, and he knew that he was going to be given detention. And so the idea is in these situations that the consequence has to matter for him not to want to do that behavior, or the consequence has to matter if he wants to do it.
And this is where that redirecting.
Right, right. And so when he went down to the ISS room, he, in just like in the times in the past, he was he spoke with a school counselor talked about the behavior that was seen, talked about the escalation, talked about what he should have done different, so there's kind of your behavior replacement. And then of course the consequence, which he knew beforehand, which was.
Is he just doing that to get attention, or is he doing that to
And
get out of work?
it can depend on,
Which
it
group?
can depend on the
he's with?
behavior, and I think, and on the day. But I think it also ties into what the activity is.
Mhm.
And because of his struggles with reading,
He's never been red carded from math class.
so, and that really shows you from language arts, it's because that's an area that's a weakness for him. It's a strength in math class, so he enjoys being in there and participating.
He doesn't want to look dumb, so he
Yeah.
turns into a jackass.
So you
And a
see-
lot of these kids would rather avoid, they would rather look bad or be known as quitting or something like that.
That it's a
over-
choice.
That is a choice, it's not
So
because
that's kind
they're
of a
dumb.
replacement thing.
It is, unfortunately, and that's what we're working on, and that's why he's being remediated in both his behavioral response to these activities and then also what's creating that, in a sense.
Well, and always there's the piece that's the avoidance. He's still required to complete what we were doing in class. So he's not getting that in the end. So if he thinks that he's leaving, which is something that's been addressed, if he thinks that he's leaving and he won't have to do it, in the end, he's still going to have to complete it. So, so that's been addressed so that he knows that he can't use that really as a tool to escape.
This ever happened in this other reading class? What's that class?
Yeah, his intervention, and I mean, he hasn't been red carded lately, but he does, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But he does have verbal outlashes, and I'll talk about that later, but he does get in trouble a little bit in his reading intervention. What the difference there, and I think is compared to the regular, well, I shouldn't say the regular ed, because they're both regular ed classes, but his core class with language arts is that class is about 25 kids, where his remediation or his RTI class would be, I think it's a class of like 9.
And those kids are.
And they're all about the
Okay.
same level,
Okay.
if not little above, little below, and depending on where they're struggling. And so there's less there because everybody's kind of in the same boat, and the curriculum is at a much lower level than what you see in the typical core class.
So it's where he's performing.
Yeah, and he does have moments, but it's less than what it is. And again, I think it's because of that conflict. There's less conflict in relation to how he feels. So for behavior from my standpoint as a case manager, when Mario was identified with ED, he was, for present level, excuse me, when he was identified, he was displaying one or more of the behavioral outbursts such as tantrums, hitting, verbally lashing out, minor destruction of property, 5 out of 5 days a week during language arts. So I mean, that was where it was.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so currently, he is not displayed any type of physical outburst in the last 2 months. So he hasn't attacked anybody, he hasn't broken any property, any of the things, the problems that we've had. So
He's
that's
getting better. Like
yeah, so
ours too.
that's a great improvement. That's a great improvement. By physical outbursts, I'm referring to causing harm to himself, causing harm to others, and causing harm to property. That's what I mean by physical. However, according to the data collected by a paraprofessional that's assigned to Mario, 2 out of 5 days per week, Mario has displayed temper tantrums or verbally lashing out towards other students and teachers. He is also exhibiting these behaviors on an average of 1 out of 5 days in his reading intervention class. So you can see that it is less. Okay? His previous goal for the outburst was to reduce them to 1 out of 5 for language arts and 1 out of 10 for his reading intervention class. So he didn't quite make that. So 5 out of the 5 days he did, and then this is something that's not necessarily like red light, but kind of a yellow light caution behavior, if you take me for what I say. 5 out of 5 days he did not bring his book, notebook, homework, or pencil to class. So those are some of those class preparation things that are pretty easy to work on, that's kind of like cautionary, that we need to address, but it's not.
You bought him a new pack of
We
pencils
got
last
pencils?
week.
He's just kind of, he just,
One of the other
It can be
teachers.
one
that
of those
avoidance
things,
piece
yeah,
too.
again, yep, again.
So if you're not prepared when you come into the room, then, oh, I don't have to be there for the beginning, maybe I can go get things, it's kind of that escape. So it kind of ties right back into that avoidance and using those strategies.
Luckily with this, having the paraprofessional in, with him, a lot of times he kind of like nips it in the bud before it starts, you know, it's like, oh, you don't have a pencil? Here you go. You know, it's kind of one of those things where it's pick the battle. You know, sure, you could send him to the hallway to go get a pencil, but with all the other bigger things that are going on in his life, and with going on with the things that we're addressing, not having a pencil in class is just, it's not that big of a deal. However, it is something that we probably need to address down the road, if that makes any sense. So, as a psychologist, oh, did you have a question? No. So as a psychologist, Mario exhibits behavior or emotional characteristics over a long period of time, and to the marked degree that his behavior adversely affects his educational performance, as evidenced by an inability to build and maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers. That's kind of what we were talking about earlier. He has a disconnect, and so he naturally feels like a sense of injustice. You know, thinks everybody's picking on him, or everybody hates him, or they can't, you know, they want to be around him, so he feels like he's having this injustice, and, you know, and it's not because of his actions, it's because of how everybody feels about him. That's that inability to build and maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships.
Does he have friends at school? I mean, he has friends.
Yeah.
They're at home. They're older than him, but.
You know, I think he has, we observe him on recess and play. There are times that he verbally assaults kids, and so I think that those connections aren't as strong as they probably could be, if that makes any sense. And because the other kids
Like
can.
calling names and.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, calling names, and anything that goes with that. He used to, as in his past, he's had reoccurrence of bullying, but we have, like, physically, and we haven't seen any physical bullying this year. And so that's something
That
that
has
we
been a
really,
problem.
yeah, and that's something we really worked on last year's, for its annual, or the year before its annual goal, so. So inappropriate types of behavior or feelings under normal circumstances. So he feels, like I said, a sense of injustice when he probably shouldn't, and he doesn't respond well to those situations. So as his case manager, consideration of special factors, student's behavior does impede his learning and the learning of others, and we are not recommending extended school year at this time.
That's.
Or like summer school, or you go to
Summer
school
school,
over
right.
school, yeah,
It's
summer.
it's a little more specialized
yeah.
than what just even summer school is, to look at specific goal areas.
So for the least restrictive environment, which he's entitled to a least restrictive environment, appropriate for his education, Mario needs specialized instruction for reading comprehension and fluency. He also needs specialized instruction to teach those behavior replacement the behavior replacement that we were talking about earlier. His language arts and reading interventions are to be taught in the general education setting. Mario will receive one-on-one specialized instruction for reading comprehension, reading fluency, behavior replacement in the ACE room, which is where it's kind of like his homeroom. And it's where
So
we work
he
on those
has
things.
2 language arts classes?
Right, and one is one which is the core class, which is teaching the district's standards, and the other one is it's strictly targeted to teach those interventions that he has gaps and weaknesses in. So it doesn't teach the district's curriculum necessarily, but it directly ties into the district curriculum, so that we can strengthen those weaknesses, so that the district curriculum at least, is manageable for him. If that makes any sense.
So what's he missing if he's having 2 language arts classes?
Well, his reading level right now is at the 4th grade.
He's not missing any PE, is he?
Oh, you mean classes?
Oh no, it's scheduled during the class. He has everybody has an hour during, it's called extended learning. Everybody has extended learning. Some people are working on enrichment, some people are working on intervention and exploratory. So he's not missing out on any of the other classes. During the time periods of ACE, he is missing out on an exploratory class. However, he does have an exploratory class, which is PE at this time, and his intervention, and of course his ACE time. And we always try to at least schedule at least one fun exploratory for the kids. And PE would be that.
Is his language arts in the beginning of the day or the end of the day?
So he has language arts, I believe, 3rd hour,
Yes.
okay? And then his ACE and his intervention is towards after lunch, so towards the afternoon.
I just didn't know if it was just starting his day off wrong. If he didn't have a class.
Not right at the start of the day.
Yeah, all of his cores are in the morning, and that's how it is for any of the students too. So it's core curriculum classes. Okay, and so he will be spending, somewhere we see this one-on-one for behavior replacement, reading, fluency, and comprehension, and he's inside the regular class for 70% of his day. So an annual goal that we're saying for reading, the baseline where we're sitting right now, given 4th grade short story reading material, Mario answers comprehension questions with 80% or more accuracy given 3 consecutive opportunities. Given 4th grade reading passages, Mario's reading fluency is 132 words per minute, which we talked about earlier. He has improved. He's had a good growth. So his goal for this year is, given 5th grade short story reading material, he will be able to answer comprehension questions with 80% accuracy, given 3 consecutive opportunities, and
That just means 3 times.
3 times in a row,
Okay.
and with the same level of difficulty. And that kind of tells us, like, okay, he's got it, let's move on, if that makes any sense. So given 5th grade reading passages, Mario's reading fluency, which is speed, will be 150 words per minute at the 5th grade level. That's what we're shooting for within the next year. So as benchmark, where we're going to see, we'd like to see by semester, which is in January, we'd like to see him, and given 5th grade short story reading material, Mario will answer comprehension questions with about 50% accuracy, given 3 consecutive opportunities. And then on top of that, we'd like to say by 3rd quarter, we'd like to see at least 70% on the same standard. If that makes any sense. And then, of course, fluency, right now we're sitting at the 4th grade for fluency, and we'd like to see him do 150 words per minute at 4th grade, because right now he's at 132 by January. And then by the 3rd quarter, which is in March, given 5th grade reading, we'd like to see him at 132, and then that would put us right at our goal by the end
And
of
you
the year.
said he jumped from the 3rd to the 4th in 3 months, or?
Mhm.
And that's good.
So yes,
It's a lot of progress.
yeah, that is a lot of progress. So within the 1st quarter, he's increased 1 grade level basically. So this is, and at the time, if he meets his goals, we'll call an IEP and we'll rewrite his goals and make them more appropriate to where we think he's going to be. If he's already meeting it by January, we're going to rewrite his goals and try to push him, because he has that right to high expectations. Okay, so data to support progress was and will be monitored during reading intervention class every 2 weeks. We're doing progress monitoring every 2 weeks. Students was absent for 25% of the class time. That was unfortunate. That was part of the things hindering the situation from meeting, or improving more than maybe he could have. 82% of the absence were due to disciplinary action.
So that's when he's getting red carded.
Red card, trouble, he's in the office talking to the principal, or or he's in a counseling session because of his actions, so on and so forth. Mario does well with one-on-one small group instruction, which we see he does do better in the small intervention class.
No one to show off for.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so for accommodations, so in the general education setting, we look at what kinds of accommodations can we provide to make him more successful. So one thing was to put him in a highly structured setting. So the more structure he has, the better. If it's a familiar area, where change and distraction would be minimum. So he has a more predictable environment that helps him. Have written directions read to him, simplify oral directions, with the exception of reading, have questions on standardized tests read to him. Has the option of small group testing, so when we say option, he can choose to go to the small group. Allowed shortened reading assignments, allow extended time on tests and quizzes, allow extended time to complete assignments. And that might help him too if he's frustrated, if he just needs a break. And then he can come back to the task. So we want to set him up for success in that way that, okay, if you need to just take a break so that you're ready, that's okay.
We think that works. Sometimes we just send him to his room and then he comes back better.
Yeah.
So.
Gives him some time to process probably, yeah. So for special education services, he's receives specialized instruction reading for fluency and reading comprehension 5 times a week for 225 minutes in a general ed classroom. Okay, assign a paraprofessional to assist with note-taking and instruction clarification. And with note-taking, then there's not that added frustration for him. And then for resource room, it is the determination of the IEP committee members that in addition to regular classroom, Mario will receive intensive one-on-one reading and oral language instruction from the special education teacher outside the general education classroom 5 times per week for 30 minutes per session, for a total of 150 minutes per week. This additional instruction will specifically target Mario's weaknesses that are identified by progress monitoring from his reading intervention class.
So that's the ACE time that we were talking about in the ACE room.
Okay.
So that 30 minutes per session, the time he's in the ACE is about 45 minutes.
Okay.
And so for 30 of those minutes, it's one-on-one reading, intensive reading intervention. We're trying to get this kid, at grade level eventually. And then the other 15 minutes we'll talk about here in a second is for behavior replacement.
Do you think Mario's gonna be the same as the other kids? Do we need to keep him in this grade? What?
He will probably, as according to all of our testing, it shows that he has there's something going on in his brain that's different than everybody else. So he probably will always have a reading disability of some sort. The difference is can we teach him, can we accommodate him so that he can perform at grade level with those accommodations? Or can we teach him strategies or techniques that kind of bypass his difficulties? And so will he be like the other kids, the tip gen ed kids? No. However, with accommodations, the idea is to get him to perform at that level with those accommodations.
We don't like hearing that he doesn't like school. His dad and I didn't graduate high school, and we want him to get there, but we feel like if he's already thinking it's done now, then are we gonna get there? Is this something that's gonna happen?
And again, I think that's one of those things where the idea of that time during, with the social worker and also with some of his peers, and then it'd be helpful if he maybe found a connection through, he loves athletics, but yet he doesn't go out for sports. So if we can find something that will connect him, that he will have a connection to the school, and through the social work, through teacher engagement, through those kind of things, those are what we're trying to get so that he feels good about school. If he doesn't have that connection, if we don't work on those things to show him that, his belief that everybody's out to get him is false, and if he doesn't have those positive connections, it's gonna be hard for him. And he's not gonna like school. But, on the other side of it, that's what we're working on. That's what those social work hours that we're gonna accommodate later, and I'll talk about. That's what, his intervention, his reading intervention, those kind of things, that if he can learn that he can perform at grade level with accommodations, he's not gonna experience as much failure. And so with failure comes anger. And if he experiences less failure, he's gonna experience less anger.
So if he went out for a sport,
We'd love him to come out.
I don't know what he could go for, or whatever he likes, or
He loves
whatever, but
football.
He's probably one of the most athletic kids in this 7th grade class.
so
If
with
he-
his behavior and his red card, I mean, could he
Oh, he has the same,
He's still-
he can play, but he has the same consequences that the other students on the field have. And that's another thing, when we start talking about consequences that need to matter, if it's something that he truly believes in, and truly wants to be, those consequences are gonna matter. And so if he knows that if he gets red carded, he has to practice, but if he doesn't go out, he doesn't get to play that weekend, that's a consequence that means something. And so he's gonna second guess his actions in those situations.
Yeah, let's talk to him.
Yeah.
And also, when you brought up the high school piece of it and concern over that, there's more of a vocational focus he can have at high school too, because they have automotive classes and they have lots of things like that.
Shop classes.
Yeah, and then there's the woods and there's welding, and so there's different things that would probably really appeal to him once he goes to high school. So it's kind of working on those skills here to kind of get him to be where he can be in that kind of environment, because those classes, there is more independent work and he has to be able to do what's expected. So if he's doing that and he's getting those skills here, it'll make him more successful in that next setting.
Okay, so for, as a school psychologist, for a baseline, for behavior, he's sitting at Mario verbally insults other students and teachers during class on an average of 3 times for every 5 days. I think that's actually a typo. I believe that's supposed to say 2 times, so I better change that. Since this is a draft, that's fine. So, yeah, there you go, that is better. So Mario exhibits tantrums on an average of 25 times, or, oh, whoa, that's a big one. 2 times for every 5 days. Yeah,
It's more like you.
2 times for every 5 days. Tantrums which include all or some of the following behavior. Throwing himself to the ground, screaming, throwing classroom materials, yelling profanities, and making hostile movements or posturing. That would be an example of tantrums.
It's posturing.
It would be like, you know, like kind of like